Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, and a warm welcome to everyone for joining this session. My name is Avirup Sarkar, and I run the Interaction Analytics Practice and Competency in Tech Mahindra. Over the next hour, we will double click on the business imperatives of customer experience and how conversational AI plays a vital role in the same. Today, we have with us two industry veterans who will help us have an engaging session. And in this discussion, Saurav and Deepak will share their experience and thoughts on conversational AI and its impact to the business. Having said that, can I request you to please introduce yourself for the benefit of the audience? Saurav, if you may go first.
Thank you, Abhirup, and welcome, Deepak. My name is Saurabh. I take care of analytics and strategic initiatives for Tech Mahindra BPS. The topic is very close to my heart. It's something which is net new in the industry. It's something which is cutting edge and no longer the bleeding edge. Personally, I'm so excited about the potential of everything interaction and speech, and also excited to share my experiences and learn from all of you. Deepak, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Saurabh. Thanks, Viroop. Again, thanks for having me on this panel. I represent Unifor. I'm part of the Partnerships and Alliances team. Unifor, as you may all know, is the global leader in conversational AI. What we have done is we've kind of built a conversational AI platform, which is taking the best aspects of speech AI, computer vision, emotional tonal analysis, and essentially providing customers and partners the right solutions, right? Again, glad to be part of this conversation and look forward to giving my views and learning from everyone as well as we go by. Back to you, Abhirup.
Once again, a warm welcome, Deepak.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Saurabh, for this. Now, while we get to the crux of the discussion, right, to give a brief overview, as a practitioner, speech and text analytics has helped me unearth a whole lot of insights when it comes to understanding, analyzing, and decoding interactions. Now, for any business, conversations and interactions are the essence of customer centricity. There's a plethora of use cases, with artificial intelligence, machine learning, digitization, and automation being the key components of the solution. Now, having said that, sort of, I think that the first question that can come up is, how do you think that speech and text analytics as a practice, has evolved over the last 5 to 10 years in the contact center ecosystem, and how effective have been the AI and the cognitive solutions in line with this practice?
So, Abhirup, in order to address this question, I guess we should go a little bit further back in time. The evolution of speech analytics itself, the time from which the human wanted to understand the speech pattern of birds and animals, it's always been our intent and our expectation to get the cues, to understand speech, and have some emotional intelligence that is attached to it. What I've read on the topic tells me that even way back in during World War, attempts were made to transcribe speech, to understand emotions, and it with the advent of computers, the phenomena took a totally different shape. Now, fast forwarding to last 5 or 6 years, technology has evolved, computing has become faster, storage has become cheaper, and the data transfer rates have in, increased many folds. Now, all that gave impetus to this industry. Speech analytics, which was even in the best case a post facto analysis. I mean, let me relate an example from earlier today. We were talking to one of our potential customers who have great experience in contact center. The lady and her team has worked in contact center for decades together, and we were talking about everything interaction, everything speech, everything real time speech, and she was trying to recall what solutions did she have in yesteryears. The best case was that yes, we had something where we could look at quality and do a post facto analysis. However, what was critical, and she said, but nobody used it. The technology was there, nobody used it. And I asked a naive question, why? It was too cumbersome. Of course, the answer goes back to technology, its components, the whole infra surrounding speech, whatnot. So it's been there, but now it's taking a totally different shape. All the more with everything which you call intelligent automation, AIML, speech has become a key data point in all decision making, especially when you talk of customer experience in contact center environment. So customer contact channels coupled with AIML have proved to be very effective tools, especially on business insights. Now, let's talk of different scenarios here. A typical agent spends few minutes. We all have been users of contact centers ourselves, and of course, we earn a living by running the contact centers. So a typical agent uses a lot more than few minutes, few seconds to mostly few minutes on a call. Now, what if all this knowledge goes back for analysis? It goes back for proactive decision making, it goes for real time assistance, and then feeds the loop back for auto ML and continuous learning. And that is where the beauty lies. One is real time, one is quality, and but the most important is the information and our ability to sync it back. And this is where the future lies actually. When we define the conversations using the knowledge of speech, using the transcriptions, using the sentiments, and then use it on micro segments of customers. So, a long answer to a short question, Abhirup, but again, huge potential, great technology. It's now it's now become reality if you look at the Gartner hype curve, something that is giving real value to the customer.
Yeah.
And of course, most of the contact centers are embracing it with open arms.
Right,
So,
right.
so if I may add, right, like couple of thoughts here, sort of spot on, right, like with the recognition that, I mean, humans are more and more, I mean, comfortable with talking to different avenues, right? Like we have billions of interactions happening all across the world. Technology has evolved to a point where consumers are comfortable interacting even with devices at homes, right? Like, so there's a lot of speech information which is out there, right? Like, and as a platform provider, one of the key things, and again, we love data, right? Like the more data, the better the models, the better the inputs, the better the intents for us to understand how customers kind of interact with enterprises as well as in their daily lives, right? Like so I think to kind of sum up, speech has become a very, very important factor into how we can learn and how enterprises or companies providing point solutions can leverage that effectively to, at the end of the day, solve customer needs, right? Like in customer issues. So I think, yeah, it's come a long way over the past 10, 15 years, and it's kind of rapidly accelerating as we see. So there's going to be more and more use cases and plethora of them as we see that.
And talking of use cases, the whole metaverse. The
Yeah,
metaverse experience will take again speech to a totally different level.
right,
People would love to interact with a bot, with a human emotion, with a human accent. And if it's a human, of course, they will botify him. And now this is where the future is really going to shape the experience per se, the CX per se for the generation Y and the people like us who are learning to live in the meta environment.
right.
Love the word Spotify is sort of. I think that really contextualizes our conversations. So, Deepak, in line with the use cases that you were mentioning, right? Now, if you were to double click on Unifor as a provider, right? What are some of the use cases that you would want to really call out, which is A, really picking up, and two, impacting the business in many, many ways.
Oh
If you
yeah,
could
a-
still elaborate a bit.
absolutely. Right. Again, as I said, I mean, there's no kind of shortage of use cases where we can see incredible applications of these new technologies, right? But if you were to look at the customer journey, right? Like, I wanted to put it in that context. Like, how do customers typically interact with enterprises, right? Like, and all of us are customers, right? Like, you deal with your bank, you deal with your telecom company, you deal with your power utility companies, etc. Right? At the end of the day, so if you look at the customer journey and how do we put the conversational AI context on top of it, so it kind of starts with us trying to kind of contact for an issue, right? Like typically it's an issue or a question we have for them. And then the first line of defense, which typically enterprises use, is a digital self-serve or a speech self-serve, right? Like that's where the conversational AI journey kind of starts, right? One of the use cases we have seen effectively blend there is the blend of speech and digital, what we call as a multimodal or an interactive voice assistant kind of a use case, which wherein if you're a customer, you kind of call in or you're trying to contact an enterprise, they can kind of show a more visual form of medium where you can effectively self-serve or try to understand or triage your issue, right? One of the examples, an industry examples, and I'll kind of give industry examples for each of these so that the context is correct. Can be a roadside assistance use case, which we've seen, right? A customer is kind of stranded, the car breaks down, they kind of call in their insurance company or the provider. And effectively, what we do is we are sending them a text message if it's reachable, and they can kind of pinpoint their exact location because GPS using digital technology is a lot easier than somebody trying to find out where the person is, right? And then based on that, we can kind of send them uh, or provide them a resolution where the company is kind of sending them some help to whichever location they are. So that kind of is an example of where the multimodal piece, wherein we are utilizing both speech as well as the digital mode to kind of effectively self-serve, right? So continuing the customer journey after the self-serve, if a self-serve does not happen, the issue is more complex, it needs more triaging, we kind of end up talking to a human, right? Like in the back end. So a lot of this context is kind of sent, and the associate is kind of not starting from scratch. They understand at least a bit of what the customer wants, and then they start asking questions around what is the exact issue and how can we assist you, right? So the conversational AI use case there can be in various forms, right? It can help understand the intent a lot more effectively, right? And then provide like guided workflow assistance to the associate so that they are responding to the questions in a more contextual manner, right? As and combine this with the power of an RPA in the back end, which automates a lot of what the agent is trying to do, right? What that does is that it kind of gives the associate more time to focus on the customer communication and not having to spend a lot of time on figuring out the backend systems, right? Like, so that increases the overall experience. The customer feels a more personal connect with the enterprise when they contact. And then, of course, the key metrics we've seen are improvement in customer experience, which for the CXO or chief digital officer, it's like top of mind, right? Like they always want every experience to be the best experience when somebody contacts the company, right? So that's another use case. And to put some industry perspective, what we have seen is we can use it in a wide variety, right? Like one is even sales, upsell, cross sell. Can the agent get guidance assistance on how to do that for a specific customer based on what they were contacting the enterprise about or what they're eligible for? So that's more of the sales kind of a use case, upsell kind of a use case. And the servicing use cases, there are plenty of them, right? Like we have done this for banks, we've done this for telecom companies, insurance companies, travel and retail, healthcare, etc. Right? Like wherein customers have issues, associates are getting the right context, and they are able to help the customer fast track some of these resolution processes, right? Like so, at the end of the day, it kind of leaves a very positive impact for the customer, as well as it reduces some of the efforts and the learning curves for the associates who are helping them out, right? Uh, so again, self-serve, then assisted self-service or assisted service. And then finally, what we call as the post interaction analytics. That kind of completes your journey, right? Like an end to end. We get a lot of data, right? Like there is self-service data, there is assisted service data, both in speech as well as digital forms, right? Like, so how can we utilize that to effectively build, improve models, improve workflows, and get data for us to kind of improve the overall experience in the back end. So that kind of is what we call as, you can call it as QA automation, you can call it as advanced speech analytics. I mean, there are various terminologies there, but the bottom line there is that we are using that data to kind of figure out, did we were we effective in resolving the customer queries, and what do we need to do both from an operations management as a work and a workflow management piece to improve the overall experience, right? So that kind of, again, it was a pretty long answer, but I think hopefully I was able to give some context on the use cases across the customer journey and the industries where we are seeing them being used the most, right? So I'll pause there, turn it over to Saurabh if you have any additional comments.
Deepak, all I can say is, see, I am a practitioner. The organization uses speech analytics to solve business problems of clients. We use speech analytics for operational efficiency. And I would totally endorse all three stages that you said: during a conversation, pre conversation, and post facto.
Right.
I mean, you talk of agent efficiency, it increases many fold. We're talking of very high percentages of savings there. And then customer experience, the ability to cross sell, upsell, the ability to give some real insights, to be able to understand the sentiment and to serve the customer well, the serviceability. It becomes so very much efficient using speech analytics. I mean, it's totally changed the paradigm.
Exactly.
And your example on the roadside assistance, Deepak, was very critical and in line with some of the views which the audience has, that where are we heading in the future, right? So if you combine conversational AI and automation and digital, you can embed conversational AI with a telematics kind of a system, right? Wherein you can predict, prevent, and link it back to the insurer purely from the cognitive nuances that's happening, right? So now, so thank you for that. I think that really gives some perspective into the use cases that are there. Now, very interesting question here. Sort of, you may want to address this. How can the speech analytics ecosystem be deployed and applicable in the Indian society? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Excellent question. I guess a lot of audience on the call would be Indians. So let me answer that. Few years back, we hardly used to interact with Alexa. Right now, Alexa usage is increasing by almost 70% annually. Millions of Alexa hits are coming every day. Talking to your Google navigational apps. Now people are using voice to navigate. Talking to Siri in Indian Indic languages.
Hmm.
That is all powered by nothing but speech analytics. I mean, that's a real life demonstration of how important and it has become even in a country like India. And nothing to take away from Indians. We are early adopters and we love tech, especially the younger generations that are there in India. So, what I can tell you is, sooner this ecosystem evolves and moves beyond the traditional Hindi, English, Marathis to other regional languages, you will see the usage growing many folds. And trust me, many organizations, rather, I would say, most organizations are on that path. So, adoption is there, very clear. Acceptance is there, it's obvious. We can see that our kids are using it, we are using it. And then the future is bright again, I would say, for the speech analytics. Now, coming back to the core, which is contact center. Now, why would contact center remain unaffected? ASRs are built for being built for Indian languages. Already, you see many government programs talking about speech analytics and integrating it totally in terms of gaining sentiment of the targets, target customers or the consumers that governments serve. So be it private sector, be it government, or be it a normal B2C user of their mobiles, I can see speech analytics and its use cases around that spreading real fast. Now, there's something else that I would like to say. Again, India has jumped many technology stages, if you may. You will very soon see that we will jump from basic speech to metaverse speech. Think of e-gaming, gaming in Indic languages. The gaming is growing tremendously. If games grow, the children, when they become slightly older, they would like the same experience, the metaverse kind of experience in everything that they do. And they would not want to type. I mean, we all just agreed that preferred human mode of communication is speaking to each other. So chat is good, but if you get the same experience, the same new age experience in a metaverse through speech, why not? Why shouldn't my language become of somebody from Star Wars character if I watched a Star Wars movie today? So you will see a lot of that happening and rather soon in India.
Right. Very well put. I think, yeah, I mean, it has been evolving, and there is a question from the audience in terms of that in the Western countries, Syria has already reached a max. So again, that is in line with the futuristic thoughts that were discussed, right? Like today we are talking about speech, tomorrow it will be virtual reality, augmented reality. So it is nothing. The foundation of all of that is nothing but analyzing conversations using machine learning and artificial intelligence to decode you know, and then the example that you gave sort of on metaverse, right? So that all of this ties up into kind of showcasing the reality of the future of speech analytics. Now, if we look at speech analytics as a component and conversational AI is something which is augmenting it, how can we dovetail the benefits of this into a total experience for the customer, for the end customer? And if that is something that we are intending to do for different businesses, who would be our key stakeholders? Who can we take this to? Who will really be interested? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, let's talk of total experience the way I see it. Well, and let's look at it from the customer as a BPO customer for a sample for right now for the conversation. When you talk of total experience, you are talking of the conversational experience, you are talking of emotional experience, you are talking of the digital or social experience, and then you are talking about the people sitting behind, employee experience, who are giving this experience to you. So when you talk of total experience, and the last, but again, the point Deepak made is also the whole operational experience, the efficiency experience. Now put it all together, that's when I call a true total experience coming in. Now, conversation or conversational AI, as the topic is slightly beyond speech. Speech is one mode of conversation. There are
Right.
multiple modes. People want to converse in emails, they would like to chat, they would even like to converse in terms of emoticons. And why
Mm.
wouldn't they? That's the future. Now, how do you bring all of them together in a single pipe, and the technology keeps on adapting to the moods of the user? So I'm happy doing chat right now, and I'm happy doing chat maybe on Signal, and I want to move to WhatsApp because I would like to forward that chat on my WhatsApp group. Oh, and yes, I should have a choice. And happy doing a chat, but I want to leave a voice message. The technology has to understand that voice message. And at that point in time, my question is not answered, and tech wants me to talk to a bot, and I'm happy talking to the bot has been trained, let's say, as was discussed in an example again earlier today, ha sir, na sir, few pointed questions, and if you say those words the bot will respond because bots need training. And I get bored, I want now to talk to a live agent.
Mm.
All that has to flow in seamlessly. All that has to be trained to give user a total experience while keeping the infrastructure, the tech, and the effort that go behind in an efficient fashion that brings the ROI. The employees are happy doing it, and to add to the fun, why not bring some social dimensions to it? Today there is a hockey match going on, and while I'm talking, I would also want to know the score of hockey or a cricket score.
Mhm.
So that's where I see total experience of today, and then of course meta, which I've been harping on after every 2 minutes, will of course take it to a new AR, VR in a more metaphysical reality. But
Right.
until then, this is how I see TX evolving.
Yeah. So
Right.
just to add to that, I mean, again, sort of great points on the entire total experience setup, right? Like, but just to add to it, I mean, we kind of I see it as so we have the customer information which is coming in all modalities, as you said, and these modalities are expanding, and we need to give consumers every form or every option because there are users like there are power users who are in self-serve, but guess what, sometimes they would like to have a conversation with someone, right? Like maybe the question or what they're looking for is a bit more complicated than what a self-service could provide. But I think organizations have to adapt to all these kind of customer personas and provide solutions from a total experience standpoint across all modalities. And the preparation for that starts with getting the right data as to how customers are interacting with that, right? Like that's a very important input into any conversational AI platform per se,
Mhm.
right? So that's the consumer angle. And from an enterprise, I think there are I think one of the questions, Abhirup, which you had was that who are kind of like the beneficiaries internally. I think I'm
Right.
pretty much the customer is at the core of any enterprise build, right? Everybody is trying to sell products to someone, right? Like so every CXO pretty much can benefit from the customer experience. Of course, some more so than the others because they are responsible for different facets, right? Like for example, a chief operations officer is more looking at how do I optimize some of my spend and improve the customer experience, right? Like at the same time. So that's one of the avenues where conversational AI can give them great insights into how we can do that, right? A different kind of persona can be chief digital officer, that organization who's looking at analytics, who's looking at data to kind of understand, fine tune the intent models and such, right? Like, as well as people who are actually devising workflows, right? Like, for example, somebody launches a new product. How do we get the feedback from the consumer as near real time and then adjust some of the workflows, some of the processes in the back end for us to provide the entire total experience, what Saurabh was mentioning about, right? Like, so the entire 360 between the customer and the enterprise with conversational AI as the bedrock is probably how I would envision it for enterprises as well as customers.
Got it. Got it. Thanks. I think that helps give some perspective. Now, in line with enterprises and customers being at the core of the services, there would be, pretty large enterprises who have certain internal setups where they, be it an analytics function, be it, a conversational AI function. So when we try, or, when we try to position any kind of offering to them, how do we resolve the conflict? How do we say that, our solutions or our offerings can, help drive more value or rather augment with yours in some fashion? How do we really resolve that conflict?
The question is for me, Abhiru.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, you can.
So, well, Deepak was better trained, but let me address this question. See, the way I understand the question, when you put the whole value proposition of speech in front of a user, how would they react
Right.
and what would their expectations be?
Right.
My feeling, personal. See, AI, ML, etc. People are enamored these days with the terms like AI, ML.
Hmm.
They expect AI, ML, and again, the good part is Deep learning is already happening on all the ASRs. It's already happening on AI/ML is being used to further increase the efficacy of transcription between speech to text.
Hmm.
So that's the first entry point. The moment you start talking of AI/ML, its evolution into speech, people take it very positively. However, sooner, very soon, the conversation comes to the ROI and the value. I mean, I spend X amount of money. What do I get in return?
Right.
And this is where I go back to the point made earlier in the conversation. Think of the return. So let's say contact center. Think of the return in terms of improved customer experience, improved net promoter score, in terms of ability to increase revenues through cross sell upsell, in terms of improving your whole efficiency metrics for the agent who has been able to deliver much more value. Look at it in terms of reducing the time of all the quality guys who look at conversations. Look at easier addressing of certain scenarios when you get a very rude customer or somebody talking things which should not be talked on a call, and you can beat them right then and there. You can put a stop to it, and they are a big saving. So the moment you put those ROIs in front of a customer, again, I have seen the receptivity is very high. But like any analytics or any AI or any new tech for that matter, people want to see it to believe it, which is why what I have seen, and I guess that will be norm for a little while. Everyone will start. They will start small. They will start as a proof of concept. They will look at the value in their ecosystem and then expand. And which is typical for any new technology adoption. Nothing new for speech, and that's my experience. Deepak, you want to add more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the way I see it, Abhirup, and especially the internal functions of any organization, right? Like I believe all these offerings kind of augment or supplement what they're trying to do, right? Like it's kind of adding on to any. I mean, at the end of the day, people within an organization know their processes and the customers the best, right? Like that's a given, right? Like they would understand the workflows, what are the customer types, customer personas, etc., right? Like so I think some of the offerings which we are talking about, those are more kind of to enhance some of the data inputs and give them more visibility, whether we are talking about new modalities like speech, even video data using computer vision, etc. Right? Like, so all this in the way I see it is just augmenting and supplementing what organizations are trying to do. So I think we are seeing a lot more organizations embrace this because the platform centricity as well, right? Like of the design helps them get the data and understand and add to what they already know, right? Like so that's kind of, and again, I think organizations are very receptive. As I said, everybody is trying to put the customer in the middle, right? So why not try to understand more, try to leverage whatever is out there for us to be able to provide the entire total experience, right? So that I don't think so to simply put, it's not much of a conflict, I would say. It's more of supplementing and trying to find the right fitment within what they're trying to do. I think that's how I would see this evolving as we deal with enterprises.
Got it. Got it.
And if I may just add to fasten the pace, what needs to be done now is improved sound classification, better data preparation and augmentation, improving the training data sets. The data pre-processing needs to be faster. So I wouldn't say that technology has evolved to a level where it is perfect.
Right.
It
Right,
There's a lot to be done.
right,
Talking of India that we talked earlier, add more dialects, add more languages, and all of these go hand in hand. And then there are issues about interferences when you're talking of speech. Not everybody is sitting in a quiet room and talking. How do you remove those interferences when you are trying to remove speech? How do you remove the biases when you are trying to add speech, add chat, and add uh, email conversations of the same customer? How do you remove the emotions and give a neutral view for a training guy to add to their knowledge management portal. I mean, all of this are work in progress, and the pace needs to increase. And I guess with so many companies coming in and great traction that we are receiving in terms of year on year CAGR for everything interaction, market in itself is driving the growth.
Yeah, exactly. I think yeah, the sort of spot on there, right? Like there's kind of like a large amount of data out there. So how do we accurately understand that, interpret it, and maybe classify it for easier consumption, right? Like that kind of will help some of the enterprise adoption go much faster as well, because the better context we can give with the data, right? Like an example of that can be like an industry cartridge or a starter pack, right? Like, so you try to deploy a solution, right? Like we kind of are not starting from scratch, but in this particular industry, we see XYZ as the top reasons, right? Like, and this is the data which we see, which kind of backs that up. Now let's kind of build up on top of it. So I think that kind of approach we've seen being more successful. And you're absolutely right. Like the pace of adoption definitely needs to increase, and some of these uh, better qualified solutions, as we put it, will kind of help the user understand how to adopt the technology as well. I think that's kind of one of the primary goals for technology companies like us, that when we build the technology, how does the end consumer use it in a more simplified fashion to achieve their objective.
Right, right. Yeah, these are very interesting perspectives, and in line now, since we're talking about data and how we are handling data and using it in multiple shape and form. One of the key imperatives for any business, globally, if you look at different norms, you have GDPR in the Europe, and several other regulatory norms that are there. Uh, with the deployments and the solutions and the offerings that speech analytics, conversational AI has to bring, how do we ensure that the data privacy and compliance protocols are in place? So would love to hear your thoughts, Saurabh, on
A
this.
fantastic question, Abhiru. I mean, I was, even if you had not asked, I would have picked this up. See, data has the new oxygen, the way I call it. It's gone beyond water or beyond oil, and speech is one big data, real, important, real, critical one. Now, how do you save it? How do you make sure that you are preserving the data and the metadata both, and making sure it's not falling in the wrong hands? And especially the matter of consent is very important. So you would have seen a number of changes that were made on Apple Store and Google Store of late, driven by privacy. Europe
Hmm.
has its GDPR. Now, we being a contact center organization have to be jealously guarded about customers' PII data and important data. Now, what is so? The answer is not that simple. One has to make sure that it's normalized. One has to ensure that if you are putting a data to use, even for training purposes, let's say for an example, you are removing some metadata from behind it, and you are making it such that nobody can trace back whose voice this was. Now, again, this is not an easy job. This
Right.
is not an easy job. It adds to your infra requirements, it adds to your cost, it adds to your training. But I personally am a believer that the companies that will survive in this domain for long are the ones who are taking data privacy very, very seriously, or even the consumers or service providers like us, who will be given the first right of deploying things like speech and interaction, would be the ones who understand the data privacy and are taking it seriously. So, a very important topic, Aviru. Technology is there to support us.
Hmm.
It's already there. It's a matter of doing it very sincerely and maybe very jealously, beyond what is the minimum ask.
Right, right. Very well
Yeah.
put. Deepak, you want to add something?
Completely agree, right? Like I think uh, one of the fundamental philosophies we need to adhere to and follow is customer data privacy, right? Like that is kind of sacrosanct. Need to make sure that any interaction is completely secure, the customer data is properly managed if it's kind of flowing through the platforms, etc. Right? Like so for any technology provider, it is kind of like something which is table stakes, right? Like and again, we have a lot of industry certifications across different industries to kind of help make sure that we are following the right path, whether it be a banking industry or a healthcare industry. I mean, everybody has a different way of looking at data, different data privacy laws, extent of data protection, etc. Right? Like so, to Saurabh's point, absolutely agree that this is very important, and people who will again survive in the long run would be people who kind of will adhere to everything, right? And again, the certifications are more of a way of making sure that we are adhering to everything as a part of a process, right? Like so that's something which we as a company also take very seriously, right? And hopefully all the technology players are doing the same, because I mean that's kind of like one of the cornerstones of the bedrocks of how we interact with an enterprise when it comes to privacy.
Right, right. Right. Thank you. Now, speaking of data privacy and the customer and total experience in mind, can we look at speech analytics platform to have a holistic, one customer view, a single source of truth? Is this something that can be built out, or do you think that that will have its interferences and will cut across different functional objectives? Can we look at a speech platform, wholly and solely to provide us single source of truth or a one customer kind of view?
See, whose customer, that has to be determined first. Now, segmentation, then micro segmentation, and now micro segmentation. Can you create something that is total holistic for everybody? Answer is yes, but it will come 20, 30 years from now when auto ML and the deep learning has evolved to a level where speech algorithms know how to train themselves for this particular segment. And that day is not very far, trust me. Now algorithms are training themselves. So that said, yes, a platform can come and will come, and not, and in fact, there are already platforms. In fact, Deepak can vouch for me. Every major provider is exactly trying to address, Avirup, what you just said.
Right.
So the platforms are there. They are all striving towards that total experience. In my opinion, the more and more deep learning goes into speech, more and more algorithms start talking to each other rather than an ASR related algorithm being separate, a segmentation being separate, and something around. Uh, so bring them all together, and that is when you'll see a true integrated solution evolving. Now, that with that in mind, the answer is yes. The total experience phenomena is right there. The platforms are there. Do they meet 100% of requirement? I would say no. Can they meet 70 to 80% next 2 to 3 years? Going by the speed of the tech evolving in this space, I can tell you absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Abhirup, to add to that, right? Like my viewpoint would be that speech is definitely one of the building blocks, right? Like of understanding the total customer experience uh, for anyone at the end of the day, because there will be different inputs to build the exact 360 or complete view, right? Like of what we are trying to observe. And because digital, other avenues like social is kind of like a digital, right? Like even metaverse is an extension of digital, what Saurabh was speaking about earlier. There's going to be different avenues, and how do we integrate that with the data we are getting from speech to give you the entire view? I think that's how the industry evolution would be from a technology standpoint, right? Like how does all of this kind of come together? Is it a one single pane of glass from a customer viewpoint, right? Like wherein This is how the customer persona is defined based on their interactions with an enterprise or what they've been doing, right? Like, so while speech I think is definitely a very important component, and it's increasing in use as well, I would see that that kind of complements with other sources, and an integrated view is how at least the technology players are looking at from a total experience, right? Like, which has been talked about earlier in the conversation.
Right, right, right. Thanks. So, now going deeper into one of the use cases, there are questions around what are the domains that speech analytics could work in. How will it work in banking, right? A very very relevant one. So I think in banking, if you look at the entire life cycle journey of a customer, I think conversational AI and speech works across, right from the time you're onboarding the customer, from your voice authentication to the time that you're managing and growing your portfolio by selling more to the customer. You're using speech analytics. You're trying to understand the customer's intent and sentiment through the dozens of interactions that you're having with the customer, over emails, chats, and all the way up to collections. So even in a world of collections, speech analytics is being used to understand the customer intent. Does the customer want to pay? What is the intent of the collector to collect? How much can the promise to pay percentages move if I try to analyze those intents? So I think it pretty much covers the entire value chain or the entire life cycle of the retail banking customer, and the same can also be kind of projected for other domains as well. So yeah.
Yes, Abiru. So banking you took, let's talk aviation as a sector.
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to book a ticket and see again, things were there. I remember way back in 2012 or 11, American Airlines used to give me that experience and I used to get fascinated. You go book, they'll ask, do you want to change the date? Yes. The voice will prompt you in options and you select one amongst those options. You need not even wait for a contact center agent to come to you. So those are the sectors where customer wants a quick response and a correct response. Speech will help, but one very very important part in this whole thing is the sentiment part, intent as well as sentiment. So you picked on intent, Abiru. I am
Yeah,
picking on sentiment.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Chat can be very neutral many a times. Even emails can be very politely written.
Right.
People genuinely can't hide their sentiments. Most of us, people like me, they can't hide their sentiments, especially when they're speaking. So knowing the sentiment is again the key. And if you get the sentiment right, high chances are that your response will be right. People think from more from heart than from their mind. So, and this is again another area. So any industry, most industry for that matter, where sentiment or customer emotions become an important aspect of your transaction, speech will become very handy. Now, again, look at, so one is real time and one is post facto. Can you train your models or can you train your agents, live agents, in a particular sentiment, a customer categorized as a sentiment A, how to address that customer? And who's the right agent to address that customer? Can
Right.
you map the right agent with a customer who's very aggrieved and showing a particular sentiment? Now, those are the things that this whole technology can help leapfrog. Of course, you need to have a bigger data set, you need to have multiple things. And I see questions coming on the India ecosystem as well. So I go back to that basics of AI ML. More data, more trainable data, better the experience.
True.
So as it increases in India, which it is, as the ecosystem grows, you will get more data, more experience, better experience, and that's how it will evolve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, I definitely agree, right? Like the intent, emotional, tonal analysis. And if you kind of extend it, what we are seeing is like growth and investment in areas like computer vision, right? Like which is more video based. although the use cases there are maybe limited as of today, because people don't typically interact that much on video with I mean, unless you're doing a personal call or something, right? Like, that is different. But how do we kind of have uh, technology built which can help enterprises or whoever kind of learn from some of what's happening, right? Like, one of the use cases in computer vision which we are looking at is more about the sales use case, right? Like, if I am kind of selling to a room on video, what kind of a, I mean, how receptive they are, how engaged is the audience, and things like those, right? Like, so that is kind of like the advancements which computer vision is making, and that's just the use case which I've put into perspective, and maybe it'll evolve. But yeah, the intent, emotional tonal analysis, as well as the video aspect of it, right? Like, kind of combined gives us a very powerful tool to engage, interpret, and make sure that we are providing the right experience across.
So very interesting use case came from that in my mind, Deepak. So I'm driving in a car. My dash cam is collecting the images from the neighborhood, from the highway. I am sounding very low. Computer vision helps me annotate that I am very close to some kind of a place where I can get, I won't say hard spirits, but something to raise my spirit. And I'm having a chat and I get a prompt. And I get a prompt. I mean, you see how seamlessly these things can happen. Saurabh, you want to take a break and stop at ABC restaurant and maybe have a cold drink. Now,
Right.
those are the kind of scenarios where computer vision, where speech, where intent, where sentiment, all of them come together. And now, what will make that happen? So, today we are talking of just one industry and one use case. So, if I were talking to my telecom provider about the bill payment issues or the higher bill in my international roaming, and I was pretty aggrieved, I was sounding low, but at the same time, this data, if it were related to other, maybe an agency that or an organization that gives you location intelligence in terms of restaurants, if it was provided to somebody else, of course data privacy kept in mind, and assuming that I have given my consent for this, when all these three come together, the experience becomes of a totally different nature. So organizations like in mobile, Google, even Apple, within the norms of data privacy, are trying to give that holistic experience, and technology is serving it. So we will see very integrated use cases emerging and not very far. And computer vision will play a very important role there.
Absolutely.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, I think we have sliced this topic in multiple ways. We have looked at geography, we have looked at time, and I think there is one relevant point that has come up now. If you look at the macroeconomic factors, right? COVID days versus non-COVID days. For last 2 years, has been a different. New normals have been defined in various ways. So when it comes to the conversational AI, application or interventions, how different is it within the COVID era versus the non-COVID era? Is it lesser or is it less effective or less, utilized, or is it the opposite? So, Deepak, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think my perspective is again, COVID has kind of, again, while it's been a different experience for all of mankind, right? This is probably one of the first things which a lot of people are encountering, things being shut down, and again, thankfully, we are seeing things return back to normal, which is great news for everyone. But coming back to the question, I think some of the things in conversational AI, I feel that it's probably more relevant than ever, right? Like, some of these evolutions, especially on some of the digital side, have been much faster, for example, right? Like, it's kind of progressed a lot of digital adoption over the last couple of years, faster than many were expecting. If you look at kind of like the curves which were being shown in 2017, 2018, right? Like, and again, people and enterprises have been forced to kind of adapt to a new normal, right? Like, people kind of working from home, how to enterprises adopt to that, right? Like with the advent of remote conferencing and that kind of picking up a lot, that kind of comes into one of the computer vision use cases, right? Like as you go by, as more and more people are on video, right? Like how does the interaction become a lot more productive, and how do people gauge what's going on in any kind of a conference or a meeting over there, right? Like so, there have been specific pockets which probably have seen a much faster growth, but I think the conversational AI as a total spectrum is probably more relevant than ever, right? Like with some pockets going much faster than what we were expecting. And hopefully this stays the same, right? Like, and there's a lot of technologies we've talked about in this conversation. How do we kind of stitch all of these together to provide the right experience, either for an enterprise or a consumer, right? Like, and adapt to increasing technologies, right? Like as we kind of look forward to that, right? I think that would be my perspective on how this has kind of impacted us over the last 2 years, and how do we see that going forward.
Sure.
Let's take our own examples for that matter. On a typical day, few years back, Deepak, you, Abhirup, and all of us would have had two or three such video calls, maybe few audio calls, and maybe five in-person meetings in the course of a day. Now, COVID has dramatically changed it. Zero in-person meeting, 100% voice or video meetings,
Yeah.
video preferred to make your attendance and to see the emotions on either side. Now, what more do we need as a catalyst for improving everything around interaction analytics or conversational AI? Because you would not expect anybody recording a physical meeting in an office. So you will never have that data set to put to some good use. But today, this 2.5 years have given us extraordinary data set that, if put to good use, can really help this tech evolve many folds. So yes, COVID in more ways than one has been a big catalyst.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a wonderful way to kind of answer this question. So I think we are now at the top of the hour, and and thank you to everyone who asked those meaningful and insightful questions. I hope we have been able to answer it. For me, it was a very enriching session. There's a lot of interesting thoughts, metaverse, future, all the way to the genesis of speech analytics. I think it made my Friday evening fruitful. So, Saurabh, Deepak, any closing comments from your side? Anything else that you want to add?
I think,
Go ahead.
yeah, it was a great session again. Thanks for having me over. Always great to share perspective, learn more in this industry. And again, I think I'm definitely reachable. This is a session on LinkedIn, so anyone who wants to reach out can directly ping me on my profile, and happy to continue the conversation. But I mean, this has been a great hour worth of session. I know you probably barely scratched the surface on some of the topics because there is so much to speak in this space, especially. And again, it's been great learning from experts like Saurabh, right? Thank you for your perspective. It helps companies like us also think about our products and solutions in a better manner. So yeah, great session, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Deepak. Thanks, Abhirup, and many thanks to the audience. I echo Deepak's sentiment. We all three of us are available to learn and share what we have learned so far. Happy to connect with each and every one of you. Have a great weekend.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Happy
Thanks,
conversing.
everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good
Thank you.
weekend. Bye,
Bye bye.
guys.